I'm taking different pieces of movement and then trying to combine them together. So for me, it's not as much as learning new movements, is creating new sequences. So I'm not learning something new anymore because those foundations are already exist in my system.
Dan Altman is a movement genius who has personally inspired my journey and hundreds of people all around the world when it comes to unlocking and accessing movement freedom. This conversation was a lot of fun. He shared some potentially unpopular ideas and beliefs around various forms of movement, such as dance and MMA, along with his secrets or tips, if you will, on how to create the type of freedom within our minds and bodies that we all, whether we know it or not, deeply crave. Hope you enjoy. Dan, welcome to the podcast, my friend. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, show. So in this conversation, there are a myriad of things I'd like to play around and talk with you about, from movement to biomechanics to the why of what you do, and really got you started on the journey. But before we hop into all of that, tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of you're currently living in Israel, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you born and raised there?
Yeah, I was actually born in Ukraine. We moved to Israel with all my family when I was around 4 years old. And I kind of grew up in Israel. Um, yeah, and started like to, um, let's say, get into this culture because I wasn't so familiar with the Israeli, and I was at Russian speaking kindergarten, so I wasn't talking Hebrew so much, and then kind of grew up here, and now people think I'm like a native Israeli. I have no accent, and nobody like knows that I actually was born in Ukraine. Yeah, that basically it. Started moving and exploring movement initially from capoeira. I don't know
How
if
old?
you heard about what.
How old were you? You started getting into capoeira?
Yeah, I was like about the fourth grade, about 10 years old, something like this. And I remember there was like a very impactful movie, The Only Strong Will Survive, something like this. It's a capoeira teacher that comes to a very problematic area with kids that are like criminals, and he basically teach them capoeira, and it's like it was a big hit in Israel, like in the 90s. Many people started to train because of this, and I was looking at this age, like finding some capoeira teacher, and I was looking for a teacher about a year or two, something like this. And it was really hard to find because I wasn't living in the center of Israel. I was living somewhere in the suburbs. And finally, when someone came, he all of a sudden like disappeared after one training, and I waited another 6 months. Yeah. And then I found a teacher, and I was traveling with this teacher like every day almost, training like 6 hours a day, 5 times a week.
Dang.
Yeah, I was really obsessed about capoeira, about movement in general. Yeah, and then I moved through different disciplines. My teacher left capoeira. Something happened. I think it was with someone, and they broke up, and then everything broke down. So I left capoeira, because I didn't like the other teacher, and continue on with my life. And then I started training other
Hmm.
disciplines, and I left because I was studying, and basically found my way to movement after about 10 years that I haven't practiced. And then I'm on this journey again.
Hmm. Okay, so there was strong roots in capoeira, but it sounds like whether it was a teacher disappeared or teacher transitioned out, and then the person who stepped in wasn't you weren't really vibing with, you eventually found yourself in the path of you're using the term movement, and actually that's something I'd like to ask you about is how do you define slash qualify what is movement or what is that culture or that context, because in my brain I'd imagine, or at least how I would think is, oh, like capoeira would be an expression of movement, and in theory so would perhaps yoga and maybe even certain elements of gymnastics and acrobatics and things like that. But how do you personally define movement, or what for you resonates as being movement?
For me, first and foremost is the health of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, like you mentioned, other practices, and as I was practicing and I tried different approaches, I saw that each approach has its own goals, and
Mm-hmm.
because of that it also has its own limitations. For example,
Mm-hmm.
capoeira, because of the tradition, they don't allow to pull to fall on the ground, because they were doing it in white clothes, and if you fall down, if somebody make you fall down, you basically um, uh, lost, and you have dirt on your pants and so on. So many movements that are including rolls on the ground doesn't include it in capoeira. Although capoeira is so you can find a variety of movement in capoeira, and so many natural movements that are good for our body, and
Mm-hmm.
fluidity that you see in many natural movements are included in capoeira. So it's very rich in terms of movement, but it's also limited. And you can see it in many disciplines like yoga. You can see that yoga is very static, and it
Mm-hmm.
puts you on the mat, and you are not able to move off the mat because it's not part of the practice. And you can see it
Mm-hmm.
throughout all disciplines. You can see it in martial arts and so on. So for me, movement is first of all the freedom of motion, the ability to move freely, and I kind of trying to not define it, defining movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like it's problematic because people want to know, give me what it is, give me the structure, give me this form that movements fall into, and I'm trying to avoid it, and I'm trying to put it as vague as possible to let people find their health and their freedom and expression in it.
Mm. It sounds, I'm not saying that you have direct influence, but what you're saying to me has a very Bruce Lee esque approach to the way that he trained martial arts, in that his initial background, from my understanding, was getting into Wing Chun and Kung Fu, but he very quickly quickly realized, from my understanding, there was a story he tells about how he was attacked in the streets, and there was points where his opponents had him in a position where he realized that his training was not done in a way that allowed him to be as versatile as he needed to be, and thus sent him on this relentless search for, well, what is martial arts, which goes on to say, like, martial arts is, it's self-expression, it's being able to honestly express oneself, but that he would train in a way where it was fluid. Hence, when Jeet Kune Do came about, the way of the intercepting fist, one of the things that they mentioned to him was, oh, like, this is, it's kind of like in Taoism they would say, the way that can be spoken is no longer the eternal way, that it's the nature of any kind of expression is meant to be fluid, and when you start putting certain barriers, blockades, or boundaries around things is when it limits our potential to what you're speaking about, is that freedom. How can we have
Yeah,
freedom if we are in this cage, in this box? Is, well, if you lay on the ground, you get dirt on your thing. Now you lose. You've lost the game, and you're stand up. You dust yourself off. You're like, really? I lost because of
yeah,
that? It is restrictive. I could see that, and I also see your point in why it wouldn't make sense to have that be our ceiling, saying this is, you can't go past this point.
yeah. You have also like the other side of it, which is you need some form, you need some structure in order to basically move properly. So our
Mm-hmm.
body meant to move in a certain ways, in certain way, because we have certain joints and they move uh, healthy. The movement of the joints stay functional and healthy as long as we do it properly, as long as we treat our our body properly. So sometimes people get out the form, which is the form of the body, the natural way it functions the best, and then they get injured, like caving the
Mm-hmm.
knee. Many people know that when you squat, you don't want to cave the knee to bring it together, because then the knee is not in the optimal form to push the
Mm-hmm.
ground. So basically you want to be free, but you also want to have the form in order to stay healthy and functional. So it's understanding the biomechanics, like how,
Mm-hmm.
what is the structure of the body, and in the other, in the other, on the other side, you want also to move freely. So this there is a game, like how I stay free, but also stay in the form, stay in the
Mm.
structure.
Okay, so would you say it's a dance between form and formlessness, that it's kind of this ebb and flow?
I think yes, and also it's a game of understanding forms and how to break them to the simplest components, and then
Yeah.
construct them in a way that you can create new forms. So every form can be break down to many small forms.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Oh.
fractional fractality. There is like many uh, images that you can get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they bringing the same patterns again and again. It's like nature. You have the leaves, and then the leaves is a representation of the whole tree. Like you find those patterns coming again and again in different forms and in different sizes. So I find movement really kind of correlate with this idea of understanding the foundations, and then trying to and knowing how to connect them together.
Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that in the way that you teach, both on, say, Instagram, but also I have taken your fundamentals course, and it's something that I come back to and remind myself, because that's something you harp on relentlessly, is fundamentals, fundamentals,
Yeah,
fundamentals. Learn this stuff really well, because your ability to do the higher level skills is heavily dependent upon how well you've mastered the fundamentals.
yeah,
It's being able to take, say, a singular movement that is, I'm guessing here, but let's just say there's this one movement that I want to learn. You're saying, well, inside of that movement, there are a series of movements, or there are a series of little pieces that come together to do that one movement. So one movement could have 10 pieces. Now, go in and zoom in on that first piece and the second piece and the third piece. And once you've practiced those well enough, and you've connected the dots well enough, and you've established the neuro hardware for it, your body begins to adapt and respond to the way that you're training now. Is that kind of in that right direction?
it's exactly that. Yeah, you got it right.
Yeah, I really appreciate your approach to teaching, because even if I take, for example, if I were to go on my phone right now and show a screen of like one of your more recent videos, and you say, "Hey, this is the movement," and then in that video you demonstrate, here's what it's going to look like, and then you break it up, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, because that's that zoom in.
Yeah.
The step one is the zoom in on that one piece, and then you do that a bunch of times, and then you add a little jump to it, and then eventually it's jump with like an arm or a jump with some air. If we break the components down enough, eventually that freedom that we seek is the byproduct of finding the freedom in each individual piece of that journey.
Yeah, and the more I see, the more I train and the more I teach students, I see that it's really important to master and internalize those fundamentals, because once they are trying to do something more complex, like combining few pieces together, they are forgetting what
Mm-hmm.
they've learned before previously, and then this is the point when the injuries are happening, because once you again lose the form, lose the structure, then you are putting your body in danger. And this
Mm-hmm.
is why I love to say that master the fundamentals, because once it's part of you, it's like an instinct. It comes naturally. It comes without you even thinking about it. And I had many times that I did something, did a flip, and then my body responded without me even thinking about it, and it saved me plenty of times from injuries, because my body adjusted to the movement in air, and it came up naturally. It came up as an instinct, and this is what I'm trying to convey, and actually persuade other people to really master the fundamentals, because it's not so sexy to many people. They don't want to learn, like, the boring stuff. Give me like the flip that you do, like give me your
Mm-hmm.
craziest flip. I want to learn it now.
Mm-hmm.
um, and yeah, this is like the dichotomy, the problem with there is like the guru on the mountain, and the students want to come to the mountain and be on the peak of the mountain, but they have to go through the path, to the road, and many people want the results fast. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
It's the instant gratification culture, at least that we have here in the States. I'm not sure how it is in Israel. Maybe you can
It's
fill me in on
it's the
that. But
same
like,
here. The same here.
you you want something quick, you go on Amazon, you order it, it's back there in the next 24 to 48 hours. We want the quick fix. We want to take a pill for everything versus
Yeah.
it's doing the work. It's committing to, if we're going to use the guru on a mountain metaphor, it's knowing that the guru is on the mountain, so to speak. But I bet you would agree that if, let's just say, you were the guru in this instance, that you are constantly going back to square one. You're
Yeah.
constantly going back to the fundamentals yourself, right? Practice
Yeah.
what you preach. And that means I'm going to walk down, do this again and again, refine and refine and refine, because what you were pointing at with you often use this word as well in your programs, is this effortlessness, this ease.
Yeah.
And one might say, oh well, we're accessing a state of flow, as Stephen Kotler defines it, a state of consciousness where we feel and perform our best, where
Yeah.
things are effortless without ease. Time dissipates because in that moment you're in the middle of the flip, and some part of your body's like, this isn't actually going to work. We need to make this small adjustment. And you pop out of it, and you could have gotten hurt if you didn't have that intrinsic body knowing. But because you relentlessly harped on the fundamentals and coming back to the beginning, and I imagine starting small, your body adapts, our bodies adapt, and we can eventually get to that mountain through connecting all the pieces that came before it.
Yeah, and you mentioned about me coming back to the fundamentals. I actually tried to practice other stuff. Like I tried to do only flexibility and trying only to do strength work without the fundamentals, without including this in the practice. I thought that my body would stay the same and my skill level will stay the same, but this
Mm-hmm.
is not the case. My body forgot certain movements, and I saw that some of the things not as polished as they were before that, and the body needs the movement, and the body needs to come back to the fundamentals. And every time that I'm taking a break from that, it reminds me how much the fundamentals is an essential part of the practice.
Okay. So I think what I heard you were saying is when you try to separate flexibility slash mobility, strength, and then movement, that what you were told was, don't worry, if you make gains here in strength and mobility, it'll stay there if you leave it alone and go back to movement. But it sounds like you're saying that that's actually not the case, that we have to constantly be integrating them and having them all point fingers at each other to continue growing.
Um, I found this thing with strength and mobility isolated from movement. So I took those two and I practiced them without the movement. So I
Mm-hmm.
isolated it from the movement and I wasn't practicing movement as much. I was doing like once in a month, once in a month, or once in 2 weeks, something like this. Um, but I saw that it has an effect on the body. Like the ranges are not the same. Um, the strength isn't the same because the stimulus that you get from movement, the variety that you get from movement, isn't replaceable. You cannot do mobility and then come back to movement and expect that the patterns you had before that will be
Mm-hmm.
restored just by training strength and mobility. Movement,
Mm-hmm.
and I also telling this my students, strength and mobility, it's a supplementary work for
Mm-hmm.
movement, because movement reveals what's the weak points that we have. So if, for example,
Mm-hmm.
your jump isn't high enough, movement will reveal that, because you will
Mm-hmm.
immediately see that maybe your backflip isn't high enough. So movement can
Mm-hmm.
reveal those patterns. If you're not flexible enough, you'll see certain clues that movement leaves. And this is the beauty, because people train only strength and only mobility, but in
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, it's not functional. And I tried it on my body, and even though I'm skilled, still you don't have the effect that people look for, I think.
Mm. It seems like this more holistic approach to doing movement, because as we're going through a particular movement, for example, I can point a finger specifically at, like, I'm training one arm handstands right now. I've done two arm handstands for a very long time. I'm training one arm handstands. And what I am seeing is that the training involves ridiculous repetitions, number of repetitions to develop strength and coordination. There's also training for mobility and making sure that your body is pliable to hit the shapes that it needs to hit, or at least in having more mobility, it allows you to access different aspects of that movement that wouldn't have been capable if I did not have that range of motion, and that they all point a finger at each other. My mobility will impact the shape or how it moves in space. If I have the strength or lack thereof, will determine, and also the conditioning, right? So there's like, can I actually do it? But then how long can I do it? Like the actual conditioning portion of it, how long can I make that last? If those all aren't coordinating, then I will not be able to maintain or hold a handstand for very long. I might get it for a moment, but it is that, as you said, come back to the fundamentals, breaking it down into its individual components, training each element of it from strength, mobility, coordination, and all of that, bringing it back together to then have this, say, finished product of a movement or one arm handstand or anything else.
Yeah,
But you had to bring it all together.
yeah. I think about this concept, about always juggling with all those fitness components. And as I said, I don't see any other way to really maintain a functional body rather than this holistic approach of doing movement, and from movement, um, realizing what you need else to work on. Like if you need to work on mobility, then apply some additional work on mobility, but movement is the foundation. If you're lacking strength, if it's jumps or presses or anything else, you should add it to movement. This is what I found to be most effective practice so far.
Yeah, there's an integrative way that you are approaching movement that I appreciate, because a lot of times it can seem disjointed. We can see, so like we say like biomechanics, and my relatedness to that word, and if you have a different relatedness, please feel free to fill me in. But I think like bio of relating to our biology or our body, and mechanics being the mechanism that is our movement. So the movement and the mechanics of our body. And if we only see it from either a mechanical perspective or only from a biological perspective, it doesn't give us the full image. You only see some aspect of the image. But something that you've mentioned, and I think is also important to highlight, is movement. To you, it seems is more than just movement. It's the opportunity to get out of our heads, perhaps where we spend a ridiculous amount of time, and really get into our bodies, really get into our experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also like movement teaches you about your internal world, because you can see that sometimes internal limitations, like internal talk that many people have, sometimes interfere with the way they move, and also the way they move um, shine shine light on what they have inside, what they think, and
Mm-hmm.
what how they see the world. So basically, movement is like a lie detector. You never can lie with your body. If you see someone frustrated, you will see it on the body, you will see it on his movement. And sometimes those limiting beliefs are rising when people practice movement. So if I sometimes uh, give someone a challenge and is not able to overcome this challenge, you will see how he reacts from the, like how his body reacts, and you immediately can tell what is going on inside his head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because his body will not function as well as he was when he felt the best and he was succeeding. And this is really psychological, enters in the psychological realm of our existence, I think.
Okay. So now we're bringing in a psychological component to the biology, biomechanical aspect. So how, so we're talking about a person, but bring me into your experience a little bit. So I imagine that if this is something that you're speaking to, that this is something that you've experienced. So where have you noticed as you were going through your journey, did you bump up against limiting beliefs, or did you bump up against like aspects inside of you, of your psychology, or maybe even within your own biology, that there were things that you shed a light on that gave you the opportunity to either really look at yourself and do some work around it, or not?
To be honest, with movement, I never had a problem, and for me, movement was like something that came to me really easy, I think, or I enjoyed it so
Mm.
much that I didn't saw the challenges that other people see. I was so passionate about it. It really came naturally to me, maybe because of that, maybe because of other reasons. But I really saw
Mhm.
those patterns when I started to teach, when I saw some limitation in other people. So if we go back a little bit, I think movement, um, if we talk about the mental side but not the emotional side, movement is also understanding patterns of motion, and basically the mechanism is the body and the musician is the mind, right? Because
Mm.
you have the body that performs, but actually the body is the instrument and the mind is the musician, right? Because the head, your brain is basically sending signals, but the body is the one that
Mm-hmm.
performs. So I think it's mental because you also have to send signals to the body, and you have to remember what signals work, and then you have to perform them again. So it's like um, understanding what works and then knowing how to do it again and again and again. And this is
Mm-hmm.
basically the science of success, right? So we want to find something, some way to reach a certain goal, right? And we are looking for the patterns that work. We are looking for the actions that bring the results that we want, right? We want more money. Let's see how we can work to get more money. We want a female partner or a partner in general. Doesn't matter if it's female. We are looking for patterns of behavior that will get us those results. And I
Mm-hmm.
think movement is first of all understanding patterns and what works and what doesn't work. And this is also brings us to to the sensitivity of the body. I want to feel what's right, what's effortless, and what's not. So I saw it when I started to exploring different kind of rolls. So I started rolling,
Mm-hmm.
and every time that I got hit from the floor, I realized that my movement wasn't as effective as it should be. So I started thinking about how can I manipulate my joints and my body, and how I can find the soft surfaces of the body to engage with the ground, so my motion will be fluent and I won't hurt my
Mm-hmm.
body. And
Mm-hmm.
with time, I found those patterns of success. And then I realized that those are the fundamentals, those are the basic forms of the body that we should first internalize in order to move with more effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you say the word internalize, what I'm imagining is our brain, it communicates through neurons, and it sends electrical impulses that are communicating information. And when we do a thing enough times, whether it's snapping a finger, doing a backflip, or any speaking specifically to coordinated movements, it sends a specific electrical impulse. And if we do it enough times, it connects neurons into a neural network. And pointing back to something you said earlier about how when you would say train mobility and strength, but you would put movement to the side, that neural network wasn't being used as often. And the whole saying, if you don't use it, you'll
Yeah,
lose it. The neurons or the connections just kind of not as important. The brain deprioritizes keeping those connections because we're not using them. Excuse me, using them as
yeah.
much. It doesn't place the same importance as if we were training it on a regular basis. And there's also this element of when we are in that training, taking the time to deconstruct what is going on in the movement. So you mentioned, well, when I would fall, I would, or land on the ground or whatever it was, I would take a moment to, I imagine it's to deconstruct it, to look at it, and to start to build those neural connections through looking at the firings that didn't work. Like, okay, I did it, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work. Oh wait, that worked a little bit more. Oh wait, that's closer. And then eventually it like snaps. Like, oh, okay, this is good. Now how do we replicate and duplicate this enough times? Now this might be getting a little bit micro, but I want to try something out here. So let's just say you were going to practice doing a movement. Do you have a process that you generally follow to build that out? Whether it's, okay, first I'm gonna watch it a few times, then I'm gonna break it down into its components, then I'm gonna do the component, then I'm gonna like take a minute afterwards and think about what worked and what didn't. Do you have some kind of process, or do you kind of more intuitively feel through it in your body, or is it a mixture? Is it something completely different? What does that look like?
Um, the first thing that comes in. to mind is sometimes when I'm imagining a lot of movement patterns, and in my mind I have like an imaginary me that doing all those
Mm-hmm.
movements. And sometimes um, I'm getting to reality, trying them in reality, and sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work because the momentum is not as I imagine it, and
Mm-hmm.
my body goes to the different direction as it was in my mind. Um, so I don't have so much this process anymore. I don't remember it because of the fundamentals. I can take one. I taking in my when I'm imagining those movements, I'm taking different pieces of movement and then trying to combine them together. So for me, it's not as much as learning new movements is creating new sequences. So I'm not learning something new anymore
Mm.
because those foundations are already exist in my system. I'm just I'm just combining them in different sequences. But if I'm thinking back, my path wasn't as I'm explaining now. So when I wasn't the master of those fundamentals, I was just doing it by trial and error. I was uh, doing it
Mm-hmm.
thousands of times until I was getting the movement. This was my process.
Go fall on my face a lot, figure it
Yeah,
out a little by little, and hopefully fall on your face a little bit less each
yeah,
time.
yeah.
But that's a good point,
Yeah,
though.
I
Go ahead.
when I was a kid, I had the privilege to fall. Now I don't have it
Mm.
anymore. Um, and this is why I say so many times, if you have someone that master a certain craft, uh, me movement, so I always tell people, learn from people that already got the keys to where you want to go, that got
Mm-hmm.
that got the path. And yeah, I think it's really important because right now I don't have this privilege to fall. So when I when I want to learn something, I go directly to people that already master those niches.
Mm-hmm. It's a simple yet really important truth that there is somebody out there. Almost anything that we can think of under the sun has been done. And they say, like, oh, nothing new has ever been created. It's just different shades of the same thing. And
Yeah,
we, to your point about movement, I'm not creating new movements. I'm simply forming new sequences with my already existent foundation. And when we can tap into the wisdom of somebody who's already walked this path for
yeah,
years, they essentially, if we're at step one and they're at step 10,000, if they make a book or they make a program, in your case, like making a program, or if they make a video on Instagram, whatever it is, this is a person who is distilling from their experience, from their trials, from their errors, from falling on their face, from making mistakes, from doing things right. They're saying, hey, this is the best path that I found so far. Maybe save yourself some time and
yeah,
energy and hear what I have to say. And that is a simple yet, I believe, often underutilized truth is that there's somebody who's already walked this path, might as well, whether it's investing the money to get that program or to get that book, or if it's investing the time and energy to learn from that person. Because sure, you could go learn it on its own. I could go and try to teach myself the fundamentals of movement, or like I did, I could come to you and say, well, he's kind of doing something that I think is really cool and I enjoy, and it's an extension of a practice that I'm already taking
yeah.
on.
And there
Yeah, let
are
me
many
let me
many
throw down the.
fields that it's so natural to do those things. Like when you want to bake a cake, right? You don't try to reinvent the
Mm-hmm,
cake. You just go and find the recipe, right? But when it
mm-hmm,
comes to movement, and I think many things, people want to do it by themselves, and we
mm-hmm,
have always the exchange. We always exchange something. Either it's our time, either it's our money, energy, effort, failures, sometimes injuries. I think we always exchange something, and when you choose exchange money, I think sometimes it's the best thing to exchange, because money, it's infinite, right? But your time isn't.
Hmm. Money is infinite, but your time isn't. Yeah, same thing with your
Yeah,
energy. If the hey, if you want to go and nonsensically expend your time and your energy, great. You are going to run out of that. You can increase your capital, you can increase your money, but we all have the same amount of seconds, minutes, and hours in the day, and how we utilize them will largely determine our quality of
yeah,
life. Back to the original point, go to the person who's already done the thing, as simple as it sounds, but like really go to that person because they've already removed a lot of the man hours figuring out, man, woman, the hours to figure that
yeah.
out.
I think it took me like about 20 years to understand what are the foundations, because I went through so many practices and so many disciplines, and I trained capoeira for so much. And after some time, you see that same patterns repeat themselves in different disciplines, because our body stay the same. The practices are changing, so we are going to utilize the same principles, the same foundational movements in so many practices. So if you can take those patterns and learn them first, and then apply them, you can, and then you can apply them basically anywhere.
I love that. And it brings me back to the point you made that I'm like really sitting with and digesting is if you mastered the fundamentals in the way that you have, there comes a point where you're not recreating the wheel every time to learn a new sequence. It's just you taking a moment and saying, okay, so this looks like this movement, or this combination of movements, or this is the like the fascial lines that it's moving, or these are the mechanics of this particular thing. How do I bring this together into something that already exists? You're tapping into the neural networks that already exist versus having to start from scratch. It's an inefficiency, it's a waste of time, and I would imagine also likely puts you at risk of injury because you're having to explore a territory that you haven't done yet because you haven't laid that foundation.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's one of the amazing things that you can do now, because once you have those foundations, you really can do so many things. And I was really many times shocked of the things that I can do with my body, because of the fundamentals. Because sometimes you imagine something in your mind, but you are not sure if you are able to do it. And I think this is what enables you to do that. Uh, the mastery of those principles, of those foundations.
Okay. And seeking those foundations, I want to keep harping this because I think it's worth harping on. It's seeking those foundations both through your own practice, but also through the practice of others.
What do you mean?
You don't have to do it like if we're looking to build foundations, right? We're looking to build fundamental layers. We can find those through observing our own practice and like compassionately scrutinizing what worked and what didn't. But then also, don't forget this part, people, is also look at others as well. Look at yourself and look at others, right? If I want to go and learn how to do a super McFly twist, I just made that up, and I just watched you do a video on it, maybe take a moment to watch that video, read the words in the caption of the Instagram post where you are sharing years of insight that took tons and tons of energy and time. You took that moment in time to capture and say, hey, here's the pathway. I've walked it. It's been paved. You don't have to go and make your own pathway. This one
Yeah.
already exists.
Yeah, it makes people's lives so much easier. I think Tony Robbins said that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. It means by that he learns all his techniques from other people that invested their time, money, and energy to extract all the good knowledge, all the gold nuggets from other people, and they made something of their own. And then he took it and created something of his own. So yeah, it's really worth of investing in this, and understanding that there are things that you don't know, and some other people know, and they can show you the shortcut. So why won't you take it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not only shortcuts, but it's shortcuts with, I can't think of the word, but you know how like there's shortcuts and they're actually, it's like on a rickety bike. It's like, hey, if you take this bike, you can
Yeah,
get there quicker. But you know, we're not sure if the bike's actually going to get you there. It's like it's a rickety bike, but the vehicle, maybe that's the metaphor I want to use, is not only is the pathway that you're taking a shorter path, but the vehicle that you're taking to get there is a good vehicle to use, which I think is
yeah,
also a good point. Is make sure that the source or the person that you're learning from has a good vehicle, and actually test it and vet it out for yourself. Don't just assume that they have the information, but pay attention. Really listen to what they're saying, because they might be selling you or encouraging you to take this shortcut, but it's on this rickety bike that like the wheel's kind of wobbling and the other wheel's kind of flat. You don't exactly have a pump hanging out nearby to make
yeah.
sure that what you're using is good. Got to be
Sometimes
mindful.
like there is another dichotomy that the you know we always as teachers think what people do we want. No
Sorry about
worries.
that. Phone
If we
alarm.
want to give people what they want, or should we give the people what they need, right? Because if you look at
Mm,
if on the fitness industry, they look to give the people like the fit body and so on and so forth, but maybe they forgetting about the health benefits. Maybe they are forgetting about
mm-hmm.
like other stuff that our body needs, but we are not getting through those practices. Or we should give them what they need, but it's not always as sexy as the other things, um, that other people giving them, right? So there is also always this like, what should I do? Um, and I think yeah, we have to like kind of cover it, give them what they want with what they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be the distinction, I imagine, of if we're gonna use like bodybuilding, for example, of looking good and feeling good. It's not just enough to look good. You can do all the training and get all bulked up, but if you're not training in a way that is biomechanically making sense, or you're not providing yourself with the type of nutrition that your body needs to function optimally, then too far to one side of that dichotomy creates imbalances and issues in the system, which has downstream effects in all areas of our life. Versus if you go way too, let's just say, like feeling good right up front with people who aren't ready for that, and maybe that's more the path of fundamentals, people might get disinterested or they might be quick to check out because you're selling them on, hey, let's crawl, and they want to do a double
Yeah,
backflip. It's like, okay, how do we integrate this dichotomy and do a little bit of both, but making sure that you're understanding over time that how you get to doing a double backflip is really focusing on that feeling good and doing the things that
yeah.
make
It's
sense for your body.
also like learning to love the journey, because when you get
Mm-hmm.
good at one thing, you want to get good at everything, and to be in the same level as as the one thing that you are good at. So for example, when for me, I'm good at movement, so sometimes I'm coming to other fields, and I already want to be the master, already want to be this guy that already knows everything. And
Yep.
as I think Ido Portal said it, I'm always a student. So coming with this mindset
Mm-hmm.
of being always a student and not looking at yourself as the master, even though you reach some level, some good level at certain things. Even at those things, go back to the fundamentals, train and do those basic stuff that they are not so sexy, but they are good for you and good for your health. And the thing is to learn how to love them and do those sometimes mundane things, um, even though like they are not so fun. Learning how to enjoy them, learn how to breathe there, to connect with your body, to get into this flow state, even though you do something that you did many times before. It's like running. It's so fun when you are getting into it, but if you are hating every second of it, you are not gonna enjoy it.
Hmm. There's two things in what you just said I want to highlight because that was really good. One is, first of all, I am not a Kobe Bryant at all, like connoisseur. Do I know a lot about his life? And I'm sure someone's going to listen to this and like patronize or pick apart what I'm about to say. But I've heard about when people discussed Kobe Bryant in his process, and there was even someone I think in an interview, I can't remember who it was, but they talked about how they came across Kobe Bryant in one of his pre-game warm-ups, and part of his warm up was he would spend, I believe it was like a couple of hours before the game, taking hundreds, if not thousands, of shots, practicing basic jumpers, basic free throws, basic. And then when you see him in the game, right, you don't see the before, you don't see the after, you just see that moment in time. And this is actually really great to even point at your practice. When we see that short 10, 15, 20-second reel and you do this incredible thing, everyone's like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. But what they didn't see was all the preparation before, all the integration and rehab after. But what had Kobe Bryant be one of the greatest of all time, arguably the greatest, depending on who you speak to? I'm not going to say whether he is or isn't, but arguably one of the greatest of all time. It was because he was relentless. So before I got rudely cut off from internet deciding to blow itself up, I was saying something about Kobe Bryant and fundamentals, and I was going to tie it to something else that you said that I thought was really important. And right now in this moment is eluding me, but there is a common thread that we are speaking to and about around, no matter how far up this supposed mountain that we've climbed, that we're always going to come back to our baseline and where we started, so to speak, and keep rounding out those fundamentals so as to continue being able to grow and build in the direction of, whether it's improving our movement practice. But I'm wondering if you found that it also applies to everyday life, that the way you do your movement practice and the way that you choose to practice has in some way perhaps even poured over into maybe how you show up in relationships, or how you show up as a business owner, or how you show up as as just a human being. Do you see those connections show up?
um, I think everything is connected, and the movement patterns and the way you organize things. I think everything is connected. I saw it in my the way it affects my practice. The way the practice affects my life in general is it made me more maybe process oriented. Like I'm looking I'm looking at everything as a process oriented thing, and I have the steps to build up to this to a certain point. And I think organization, it's also comes from the movement, because certain movements, certain sequences have to happen in a certain order. And I realized in my life the importance of those things, um, in many aspects, like in the business side, in relationships. Yeah, I think movement has taught me a lot of lessons. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing that there is specifically the part of process and being able to see how, yeah, I created a process over here in movement. I can also, with some fluidity, have some kind of process, whether it's business, movement, or relationship, and it all kind of ties together. When you when you imagine, if I mean maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but what do you see as like the bigger vision, the why of what is possible when more people decide to take this journey? So like when you are working with someone, whether it's through their program or they're working with you privately, what is the vision or the why?
Their why or my?
Yours. You have a reason for sharing what you're sharing, and I assume that it's beyond, oh, well, let's learn some cool movements, and we've probably already been alluding to some of it throughout this conversation. But what is your why?
Um, I think it comes back to the limitations and different disciplines, how they, in some way, liberates us, but in other way limit us. So I think for me, it's the want and the need to share this idea that we don't have to be tied up to one specific practice and one specific sport. And we need to think about our body first, like putting our body on the first priority,
Mm,
because many sports are focusing on the goal of reaching a certain title, winning a certain medal. If it's a dancer, even that it's not a competitive sport, they also put their body under enormous pressure to perform. And I think the body comes second when people doing those things, when people are trying to reach a certain goal, an external goal which is not their body. And sometimes it puts people in a position that they are forcing their injuries. And I think many people even find it in martial arts. They um, many people so much tied with those kind of practices that it's really hard for them to hear that you should think first about your body, and you should think first about your health and not about the practice as much. So I had a post on my Instagram about how abusive martial arts are, and many people don't talk about it and get very defensive about it. And I get
hmm
their point, and I get why they are so defensive about it, because all their life invested in it, and they see the tradition and all the good stuff that those kinds of practices brings. But I think all of those things can be achieved without the violence behind it. Like I trained Thai box for quite some time, and this sport meant to hurt people. You win by making someone else lose, right?
mm,
So I don't see how those sports are beneficial in the sense of the keeping our body healthy and functional. Um, and I think it's really important to start with this idea in mind, like what kind of sports, what kind of practices will enable me to stay healthy and functional and improve this over the years. Like what can be something that I can do 10 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe not in the same intensity, but still you want to have this idea in mind.
hmm Yeah, it sounds like there's a focus on longevity and making sure that the practice can be extensive, which, playing devil's advocate, I'm not pro martial arts or anti martial arts, but I would imagine that if we were in a conversation with me, you, and a martial artist, they would probably have some point to be made around whether it's like they love the sport or they love whooping ass, or maybe it's, I really got into this because I was picked on as a kid, and I wanted to be able to defend myself, or I wanted to be able to defend my family, or whatever it is. I mean, you could point at so many different directions why somebody might want to take on that practice. But to your point, it
Yes.
sounds like if we are wanting to build a practice of movement that allows us to play, to explore, to be free in our movement for a sustainable period of time, that there are methods that aren't as taxing on the bones, the joints, the ligaments, the general well-being of our vessel. Because if it's constantly taking a pounding, sure, there will be adaptations, but how deep does it run in terms of the long-term stress potentially maybe that it has in our bodies, physically, mentally, emotionally? Like, what does that look like? I personally can't say that I do, but if our approach is let's make this one vehicle that we have work as well as we can, I could see your point in maybe looking at a path that isn't as harmful, whether it's
Yeah.
martial arts or any other
Yeah, I
practice.
understand some perspective that our world is not perfect, and sometimes people get abused, and sometimes things happen. But if we like want to design the perfect world, I think the perfect thing is coming from this idea. It's not always possible, and yeah, I know reality. You have like expectation and reality, and we have to find some the middle ground, the middle.
And that, again, another comment thread of this conversation, it's the dichotomy. It
Yeah,
just is. There are both sides, and I think that it's possible that leaning too heavy to one side over any extended period of time, it just creates this static imbalance that sustainably probably isn't, it doesn't make sense in like a full spectrum human experience. We can't be happy all the time and feel good all the time. We also are going to experience sadness, grief, anger, frustration, that it is a pendulum that is, perhaps swinging, but that when we can, hang around more of a center, more of that, to me, kind of truth having a tendency to be somewhere in between both sides of that dichotomy, that's where we can we can reap the benefits of both sides, because potentially there are benefits to both sides, but you can experience a lot more of the cons of one side, or even miss out on the benefits of the other side, and not being adaptive and open and malleable to other ideas than where we currently stand.
yeah. I think you brought a nice point here, and I think it's a constant search for this kind of for this balance between freedom and structure, balance
Mm.
between achievements and freedom and health, right? So yeah, even money, it's part of it. It's part of it. You want to give something that is valuable, that people need, but you also want give them something that they are willing to pay for. If they are willing to pay for a perfect body, you want to give them a program for building a perfect body, but you also want them to realize the other benefits of moving with freedom, of mobility, of all of those things, and finding this balance. It's it's the balance between what you imagine and what actually exists.
Making sure that we're managing our expectations and reality. It might be hard to
Yeah,
sell
yeah,
somebody on let's go to the gym and do 1,000 reps of this, but if you sell them on let's get yoked, whatever people want to buy, whether it's let's get yoked or maybe let's move with freedom, let's experience movement freedom and emotional freedom and those other freedoms. It's giving people it's selling people on what they want, but then there's always that sneaking in, if you will, around, and in order to get what you want, here are the things that you need to do. It's both.
yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah. And it's also about the hard work. Yeah, like you want the result, but what about doing something
Mm-hmm.
about the result?
Yes, yes, yes. Snaps to that. I'm reading a book called Do the Work by Dr. Nicole. Oh, her last name, it always like gets past me, but it's the same. It's that same principle. Yeah, you want to heal, you want to grow, you want to expand, you want to experience your potential. Great. You got to do the work every day, every day, every day.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll miss, but that's okay. Get back on and get back to it every day, every day.
and it's learning how to enjoy it, how to enter to this flow state, because this is like this is what we really gives us the sense of achievement and the sense of joy. Knowing how to structure those challenges, you want them to be challenging but not as much challenging so you get overwhelmed, and trying to manage yourself, because we also have those instincts, the dopamine addiction that we all probably all have, like Instagram and instant gratification, as we talked about, and processed food and sugar and so on and so forth.
Yeah. In Stephen Kotler's book, The Art of the Impossible, which is pretty much the science, the practical science of flow, one of the things that he speaks to is the challenge skills ratio, that we want to make sure that there is a balance in how challenged to how much skill we currently have in this ratio. And it points exactly what you just said. Too much challenge, not enough skills, anxiety, overwhelm, not an optimal state for growth. Not enough challenge, a lot of skill, it creates boredom, right? If you're playing
Yeah.
frisbee, I love frisbee. It's one of my favorite pastimes. If I'm playing frisbee with a group of people who just wipe the floors with me and I want so desperately to be good, it can be challenging to actually drop into that flow zone, which is in between anxiety and boredom. But if I'm playing with somebody who is doing it for the first time and my goal is to like get in there and have, like to really like play, I'm probably going to experience maybe a little bit more boredom unless I'm coming from like a, well, let me teach, let me show perspective, which is a kind of its own different
Yeah.
thing. But that when we can harmonize between challenge and the skills that we currently have, this is how we can access, I think what you're pointing at is this flow state.
Yeah. 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 So really loving what you do, I think, is always finding ways to enter to this flow state, knowing your rituals before you started practice. For me, for example, I have the basic movements, the warm up, the Zen warm up. I think you saw it in the program. I
Yep.
think I also wrote it there that the warm up isn't so much for the warm up itself, it's also to make you to enter to the flow state, to get in touch with your body, get in touch with your senses, start feeling, breathing, and all of those good stuff that get you into the flow state.
Beautiful. It's priming you for the experience. It's getting you, it's like the pre warm up to the warm up. It actually is getting you into that desired state before you just mindlessly go through your training. Let's mindfully and embodied state enter our practice and drop in, so it isn't just
Yeah.
arduous and boring or just largely unenjoyable, because that's one way to not want to continue walking that path, is that the path you find no joy or no curiosity or a healthy amount of struggle. It's balancing it, which I did love about the Zen warm up, is that it encouraged being present and dropping into that state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. So taking a right turn here for a moment, what is one thing about you unique to you? What is one weird or unique thing about you that like most people don't know?
Um, I like to analyze things. I'm very analytical, and I'm maybe now you know, and maybe I hinted about it a bit. Is that I'm always oriented on the process and the cause and effect. I think this is the foundational principle of nature, and I always curious about the cause and effect, like what caused to something to succeed, what is the way, what is the pattern, what stays in the roots of those results, and not only results, but I always seek for the roots, maybe for the truth, some might say, um, I think this is really something that I always engage and always thinking about it. Like uh, everything, almost everything that I see or hear, I want to know like what is the foundation, what is the root, what is the truth, and I think this is what brought me to realizing and finding those fundamental movements, is looking what are the foundations, what are the basics, and this is, I think, what can describe my weirdness.
Love it. Love it. A massive commitment to being curious, understanding the process, understanding the fundamentals and the foundations, just as a way of life. So,
Yeah.
if people are wanting to get connected to you and hear more about what you're up to with, creating movement freedom, how can they get connected to you?
The simplest way is my Instagram page, at Dan Altman 10, or it's Altman Dan 10. I don't remember. And yeah,
One or the other.
basically.
It'll be in the show notes, people. Don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you.
Beautiful. And one final question, which is, in everything that we've talked about, what is one thing that somebody can start doing right now to actualize on whether it's creating movement freedom or understanding how to deconstruct a process better, or how to fall in love with the journey, whatever you want to speak to? What is one thing that somebody can do right now to start that journey?
Um, I don't want to be too salesy, but I think the best thing to find freedom of motion, in my opinion, is the process I created,
Yep.
which is the movement manual. I'm believing in it. I'm passionate about it, and I don't think that there is anything better than that, that gives my 17 years when I created it of expertise, boiled down to the simplest components. I think everybody can do and everybody can start practicing.
Well, let me be salesy on your behalf. If you're listening and you are wanting to create movement freedom, I've personally done the program. It's really great. It's something I consistently come back to and has encouraged me a lot on my movement journey. So definitely give that a shout. You can find that on his Instagram. You can also probably find that in the show notes as well. So I appreciate you sharing that, Dan. And also, I appreciate you taking the time to come and play a little bit today.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the talk. I think you are very talented, and I think you are just on the rise. You're just starting your journey in helping other people, and I think I love your stuff that you do with the breath work. Really inspiring. Keep growing.
Appreciate that, brother. Appreciate it a lot. And to those of you listening, thank you for your ears. Thank you for checking out, what we had to share. And as always, continue to find, follow, live your truth, and follow the wolf within you. How? Thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe and share this with your people. Big love, fam.